Had any women mentioned in this race yet, but the one name comes to mind. I said no women. I'm only joking. What about Diane Abbott? What about Diane Abbott?
I don't have the ankles for it. You need well-turned ankles like Anne Widdecombe to be a female speaker.
All right, Betty. Well, because Betty Boothroyd was a Tiller girl, so she had well-turned ankles. You certainly...
That was a non-denial denial.
I noticed that. I thought I'd just let it hang in there now that we're on prime time. You wouldn't want, if you wanted to make a few bob, you wouldn't want Frank Field signing your expenses. You go through every penny.
Well, what is, I think, significant in the great span of history, all of those people we've talked about as outsiders would clearly have been on the parliamentary side of the Civil War and not on the Cavalier side. I think we're looking for a Roundhead.
Right. Speaking of Roundhead and Cavaliers, all the party leaders are talking tough about if MPs have, quote, done wrong over their expenses, then they must suffer. I'm not clear, Diane, exactly what the criteria is by which you've done wrong. For example, I don't understand why if Hazel Blears, what she did is, quote, totally unacceptable, why what Jeff Hoon and Mr. Purnell did isn't totally unacceptable.
Well, Hoon and Purnell didn't write Fisher's articles against the Prime Minister.
Oh, cynic. Let me just say this.
Right,
I think
it's not a distinction that's going to hold water for any length of time under questioning, Michael.
People talking about Gordon Brown's Star Chamber. It's not Gordon Brown's Star Chamber, it's the Labour Party Star Chamber. Now, it's been a very long time since the National Executive of the Labour Party had any existence separate from the leader. But this may be the time, because the Labour Party is furious about this. And it is unwise of the Prime Minister to go around saying this one's in the clear and that one isn't in the clear. Because in the end, the National Executive of the Labour Party has set up a system, and it is very unwilling to distinguish between members of the Cabinet and ordinary MPs. And Gordon Brown may find it better not to, give the stamp of approval to individual members of the Cabinet, because if the NEC chooses to let its procedure run, we will see what happens.
Michael?
Yes, and from what I've heard of Hoon and Purnell, they're still back in the last chapter. They're still saying, I did everything according to the rules.
The Nuremberg defence.
Whereas, what we've moved on to is it doesn't really matter what the rules said. It's whether what you did was ethical, whether it was just. And I don't know exactly what they would say to that question, but that's a much tougher one.
To be honest, I think there is a small minority here where we're not talking about doing what the rules said. We're talking about potentially criminal prosecutions where there is obtaining money by deception, where you're actually putting claims in for mortgages that don't exist. You are making claims to the House of Commons authorities for what your second home is, that you're telling a different story to the tax authorities for capital gains tax. These are real problems.
The police have said that even if people have abided by the rules, that doesn't mean to say they haven't committed a crime.
Exactly, it could still be fraud. Chris, final question to you. Whitsun recess coming up, off for 10 days. Will that help, or will we come back and it will still be a ferment?
Well, I think that there is a sort of journalistic life to this story. I can't believe that the Telegraph is going to go on devoting page after page.
Who would have thought about Duck Islands?
Who would have thought about Duck Islands? Maybe there are enough new revelations. But I think that there is a real mood. I've been out on the doorstep a lot. We've got elections in Eastleigh. There's a real mood for change, which isn't just going to stop here. It's people beginning to open up all the sort of questions that you discussed with David Starkey earlier. I think it's a really important opportunity for us to try and remake politics and reconnect with the voters.
Which will make for interesting times. Chris Huhne, thanks for being on this week. Good to see you again. Now, moving on to a subject that I'm sure is close to all of your twisted hearts. Revenge. Nothing is sweeter than getting your own back, or at least that's what I think. It said you should keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. So now you know why these two are on every week. With our politicians seeking payback after paying back their expenses, we're putting revenge into the spotlight. Revenge.